Now, researchers at the University of Cambridge and Erasmus University, and that's located in the Netherlands, they used economic modeling to calculate the consequences of a 50 gigaton reservoir of methane from the thawing permafrost under the East Siberian Sea. Now you're thinking, okay, so they're doing this this economic modeling of whatever, permafrost, right? No, the scenario that they modeled out basically was that the researchers examined was a release of methane over a decade. Now, and they did that as the model that they used was this release of methane over a decade using the temperatures rising at their current pace. Now, they also looked at lower and slower releases of that methane, and through all of those studies, they saw that it produced steep economic costs stemming from physical changes to the Arctic. Now, Gail Whiteman, an author of the report and professor of sustainability, management, and climate change at the Rotterdam School of Management, said, quote, "The global impact of a warming Arctic is an economic time bomb." Now, that sounds pretty serious, right? So, well, how much, right? Well, in the absence of climate change mitigation measures, the model calculates that it would increase mean global climate impacts by $60 trillion. And this is according to a man named Chris Hope, and he's a reader in policy modeling at the Cambridge Judge Business School, and that's part of the University of Cambridge. So these are business people doing economic modeling and saying, yeah, if temperatures continue to rise at their current pace, within a decade, we're going to see a lot of methane possibly being released into the atmosphere, and it's going to cost $60 trillion. Now, to put this into perspective, the entire global economy last year was at $70 trillion. So the effects of climate change literally will eat the entire economy. Now, what do you guys think about this? That's pretty heavy shit.
It blows my mind that people don't care about the environment and the world around them until money comes into play, until an actual dollar amount is applied to the disaster that we're facing. I don't know if we can make it clear to people how this is going to screw us all over. Forget about money. Let's just think about a future where the skies are no longer blue because there's so much pollution that there's just a bunch of smog and darkness in the air. The fact that we won't be able to breathe well. The fact that there'll be so much carbon and methane in the air that people will be dying from lung cancer left and right who've never smoked a day in their lives. That we are facing the biggest global rate of extinction that this world that the human race has ever seen. That soon we're going to see places like Los Angeles, Miami, New York City underwater because of the rising tide from the rising ocean.
Miami. We could lose Miami by the end of the century, and that's not just like, at the end of the century, it's about a year away, and then suddenly Miami is underwater. No, it could happen at any time within the next 100 years, and that's fucking scary. Within our lifetime, Miami could be underwater.
Yeah, more and
even
more
for 5 feet of water.
More and more places are going to become entirely uninhabitable. The storms are going to become extremely large and even more powerful. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tremors are already becoming more frequent thanks to things like fracking. I mean, Japan is toxic right now because during their last massive earthquake, there were all those nuclear factories that exploded, and
Fukushima is actually still releasing some sort of radioactive steam.
Yeah.
Right now.
And in our own country, we've got oil spills, we've got forest fires and droughts and massive crop failures because of the rising heat. We've got more and more people dying of heat stroke. People dying in their homes because it's a combination of issues. It's an economic and environmental issue because you've got poor people dying in their homes because not only is it so hot, but they can't afford air conditioning. And it's the state of the combination of the state of our economy and our environment. It's like we're up against a rock and there's a freight train coming right at us, and eventually we're going to feel the full impact.
Now, I like how you bring up poor people because, according to this study, 80% of the costs would be borne by poor developing countries.
Oh, of course.
And this study also doesn't include factors like ocean acidification, so that's not even factored in. And another interesting point that this study says is that the cost could be lowered to only $37 trillion if we took action right now to lower our carbon emissions. So I mean,
this would be too inconvenient for people.
Even
like a woman that
now, $37 trillion is still an enormous amount of money. Enormous.
It is. But that's the minimum that we're facing at this very moment. And if we take action right now, we're still facing that cost. There are still consequences that are never going to be able to be fully reversed because it's already too far gone.
Well,
but
Sean,
if we stop now, we could make.
Now, Sean, chime in.
I was just gonna say I'm not buying it.
Not buying it?
Not
You're not
buying it.
an economic study?
I'm not buying this economic study. There've been too many like you guys know my position that climate change is real, climate change is a problem, and all that. But like there's certain specific studies always bug me for some reason, and this one goes into that category of not buying it. I don't know how much it's gonna cost. I know it's gonna be a lot, but I gotta figure that somewhere along the next 100 years, the next 200 years, that we're gonna figure out some kind of technology to deal with some of these problems.
Yeah, but that's
a displacement mentality. That's a detachment, displacement mentality. It's someone else's problem. Someone else will figure out. A miracle will happen.
We hear this on Fox News all the time.
I don't have to worry about it. It's not my problem.
But that's not what I mean. Like, for instance, we've all heard that there would be no more pasta by a certain year because of
no more coffee.
Because of wheat crops and all that. Like, all those stories, to me, those are the stories that I buy the least out of all of them. Because wheat, like, to say that we're not going to have any new developments in learning how to grow wheat in the next 30 years, and I'm using wheat specifically for pasta, is a ridiculous statement to make. So
is it? Because
it is
because there's going to be not going to be any new technologies. But look at, we have new technologies right now, but guess who's blocking their implementation?
But the thing
is,
many of those technologies are the reasons that we're in this mess in the first place.
But the thing is, technology
isn't necessarily a good thing, and human beings are not capable of absolutely anything just from science.
Yeah, but we already have technologies that we can use right now.
But the thing
there is a profit motive. There is an incentive to not use those technologies, and that's really what we're up against here. That's why I think that this study is legitimate, because we're not doing anything to stop it, even though we could. We're going full steam ahead, drill, baby, drill, pump out that carbon, because it's making somebody some money.
I understand.
The technology that we need is the sustainable type of technology.
And we already have something that we already have those kinds of technologies that we could do more investment in, and we're not.
I knew you guys were going to react like this, but that's okay. But the reason I brought up the wheat story, because the wheat story is the one that stuck out to me the most, because temperatures undeniably have risen the past 20 years by a lot, right? And wheat is specifically not tolerant to temperature changes. So in the last 20 years, would you guys say we've had more wheat production or less wheat production?
Well, we haven't looked at the specific numbers of.
Yeah, but I have looked at the numbers, and even though wheat is specifically negatively affected by heat, and over the last 20 years we've had a dramatic increase in heat, we've had more wheat production because technology. We're really good at doing certain things with our food. That's why it's certain
as the climate
like
warms,
GMOs
certain places
and,
that didn't that were too cold for wheat are now open for wheat.
But I'm
You
just
also
saying.
have that.
I'm just
Absolutely.
saying, but I'm just saying, as a general example, all these. Every time I hear we're going to run out of a
It's
specific
too general.
resource,
It's not specific. It's not involving all the different
well, I
factors.
gave a specific
GMOs
example,
we've got.
but as a general principle, every time I hear we're running out of resources, I like if you go crack a history book, you know that's not true. And every time I hear these long-term studies that are like, if everything stays the same, then this is what's going to happen.
No,
But
this
we know,
study
but we
says we're
know
going
that.
to look at if temperatures continue to rise at the current rate. Nothing is staying the same
I
except for the
understand,
rate.
but like,
And
but
and to
Earth.
be fair to your point, yes, things do change. In fact, for the last, I don't know, the last 5-10 years, the different studies, scientists have come out about the rate of how we're warming. They've had to revise those because
Yeah,
we're moving even faster.
because
Right,
things
it's going
change.
exponentially. As it gets hotter, I mean, it just aggravates the rate at which
But
it's getting hotter.
But that's why I don't believe these long-term studies, because a lot of things, if they keep revising them to go
But it's
up,
not changing in a good way. It's
It's
changing
I know
changing
it's
in a
not
worse
bad
changing
way.
way.
in a
Things
good way,
are
but I'm
worse than we thought, not better. And the wheat thing is Jeff made a very good point. There are a lot more areas opening up for certain crops because it's getting warmer, but that's going to have negative consequences
But-
because now the middle of the country is seeing massive droughts and crop failures because they can't deal with the heat and the pests and the lack of water, like places down in Florida, especially in very southern areas like that.
And we should
Massive
talk
crop
about a little
failures
bit
of
about
even
record
oranges
heat.
and strawberries and things that are tolerant to the heat are dying.
but to me, the crop failure, or more particularly, is corn failure, has to do a lot more with our farm program than the environment. If we keep subsidizing these high water crops, like all the crops that the United States government subsidize are high water content crops. If we keep subsidizing them, then yeah, if you keep planting a high water type crop in the earth, it's going to keep sucking up the moisture, and eventually that soil is going to go. You're
All
going to
right,
have
but I feel like
a
we've
dust
got
bowl. But
way
I know
away
we're
from
getting
that.
off. But my
I-
point is, look, I understand that it's bad, and I understand that this study is disastrous, and the 37 trillion is disastrous, the 60 trillion is disastrous. But I can't, like, to me, I can't, like, for whatever reason, whenever I hear these long studies, like, remember the one about the 100 million people dying from global warming in the next 50 years? Like, that study, like, I can't buy that one either, because when I looked at it, it said most people died from indoor air pollution, which is caused by not using fossil fuels.
All right, so, well, I just want to make another point about the record temperatures. Okay, before we move on to the next one, I just want to say that the June was a record setter in when it came to how hot it's been. This would make the 28th year that global temperatures have been above average. Nobody that's younger than 28 years old has ever seen cooler than normal temperatures overall in the climate. So, and that kind of brings me to a very prominent climate denier, and that's by the name of Dr. William Happer. Now, he's the chairman of the George C. Marshall Institute, and that's a conservative think tank. And would you look at that? He got money from oil and gas. Now, contrary to what he says, quote, contrary to what some would have us believe, increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will benefit the increasing population on the planet by increasing agricultural productivity. So that kind of goes along with the point that you were making.
I don't know. How did that go? Oh, with the wheat and all that.
Yeah, he's essentially made that point for you, and I don't buy it.
He made it in a different. I
He
talk
made it in a
specifically.
different way, but it's
I
still
talk
kind of the same point.
specifically about a certain crop, about technology and all that. He's saying that, like, he's using a very basic, like, scientific, like, fact to try and shield you from an overall scientific, like, problem. He's saying, oh, carbon, plants eat that. More carbon, more plants. Like, that's what he's saying. I'm just
That's
saying
like
that.
Michelle Bachmann, but it's essentially, kind of making the point about agricultural production, that you're also making the point that, you know what, this agricultural production has gone up, and you use a different reasoning as to why than he does, but it's still, in my mind, I don't buy it either.
Point well taken, but like I said, I was saying that because of technology and us learning how to grow stuff better is going to protect us from from running out of wheat in 50 years, from running out of coffee in like a few years or whatever. You know what I mean? Like he's just saying something so basic, it's funny that he's saying carbon plus tree equals happy tree is basically what he's
Well,
saying.
I think we can all agree that this guy is an absolute moron and a shill for the oil and gas industry.